Dans le cadre de ce troisième...
To tell you about the discussions we had today on the occasion of this third summit of the European Political Community, a year to the day after our first meeting in Prague. Of course, there are many crises happening in Europe, and I would like to thank the President of the government, Pedro Sanchez, and his teams for hosting us today in Granada and for the discussions we had. The first point on which we achieved progress in the margins and on the occasion of this summit is the expansion of our EU cyber reserve. Digital issues and intelligence artificials were at the heart of one of our roundtables, and as you know, we shared a number of joint ambitions, considering that this was the right scale. And the European Cyber Reserve keeps expanding to ECP country, to all the countries that requested it. And in the coming month, this reserve will be effectively deployed. And it means that we will be able to deploy reliable experts in any country suffering a major cyber attack. The second pillar aiming at strengthening our collective resilience is about ramping up the skills of our domestic institutions. So in the coming weeks, together with the Prime Minister of Montenegro, we'll sign an agreement setting up as an international organization a center for the development of cyber capabilities in the Western Balkans. It will be based in Montenegro. And the purpose of this center is to provide the training on cybersecurity, the fight against cybercrime for all countries of the Western Balkans, given that in Chisinau we acknowledge that there were a growing number of attacks that very much justified such a training effort to increase the resilience of the entire region. Another challenge for the EPC, of course, is to bring our citizens, in particular our young people, closer together. And in this respect, we also achieved progress on the occasion of this summit on a number of initiatives. First of all, there is an initiative to expand a scheme such as the Rail Interrail Pass, so that our young people can travel around this continent, which is theirs. And also there is this idea of a cultural pass in order to facilitate access to art and culture. At the moment, that was only for EU countries, but we're expanding it. Beyond that, there are three topics I'm meant to tell you about specifically, which we've been discussing. First of all, there is the fact that beyond cybersecurity and supporting our young people, there is this issue of security and migration, which is meant to be structured at the level of the EPC. The initiative was taken by Prime Minister Sunak, and I thank him for that. The initiative of a meeting between the UK, Italy, France, the Netherlands, and others, and the European Commission, the European Council, and based on some of the work undertaken by the European institutions in some of the countries, we worked on that, and we acknowledged some future work in order to share information and work together and share our intelligence to stop smugglers. And we also acknowledge that there are very diverse situations, different tools in the different EU countries, so we want to harmonize all of that. And we also want to work more with countries of origin and countries of transit. And there will be also some common work with the UNHCR and the International Organization on Migration in order to reduce the migration pressure on these countries. So these are some of the key elements we've been discussing, and that very much comes in support of what was agreed in March together with Mrs. Meloni and Mrs. von der Leyen. But I consider that the European political community is very relevant when it comes to tackling migration, first of all, because there are a number of countries of origin within the Western Balkan countries, and we very much want to tackle illegal migrations. And we've been working 5 years ago already with Albania, and the United Kingdom is doing the same with Albania at the moment. So we want to structure all of that. And also we want to have a much more coordinated action with the countries of origin and countries of transit. This is the only way to be efficient. Because otherwise, if we act differently or if we're not synchronized, no matter what we do at a bilateral level, with a number of transit countries, for example, the south shore of the Mediterranean or the Middle East, well, we're not very effective if we only work at the bilateral level. So cybersecurity, young people, and immigration, which is a third pillar very much being developed within the ECP. Please allow me to also mention two crises, Ukraine and Armenia. Well, regarding Ukraine, I met with President Zelensky and once again I assured him of the support of France and that of the Europeans in the existing circumstances. We consider that the situation should not change, and I had a chance to tell him that we would keep supporting Ukraine in the long run in accordance with the commitments that we made. And we took stock as to what is happening on the ground, and France will very much continue to stand by Ukraine. Next, we met with President Michel and Chancellor Scholz, together with Prime Minister Pashinyan, to talk about the situation in Armenia and in Nagorno-Karabakh. And we expressed our intent to support and very firmly so, the independence and territorial integrity of Armenia. We also said that we would develop as much as we could the relationship between the European Union and Armenia, and we already looked at some details. We also agreed to provide some further humanitarian support to Armenia, given that they are dealing with this massive number of refugees who are fleeing Nagorno-Karabakh, and they should be able to go back to their homes under international supervision and without any condition. And this very clear support of the Europeans for Armenians is about defending the right of peoples to stay where they belong and to go back to their homes. And this is something we're very clear about regarding Azerbaijan. We're also very much working in order to normalize the relationship between Armenia and Azerbaijan based on the principles of the integrity of the borders of Armenia. And let us remember that it was also on the occasion of a previous meeting of the ECP, and that we obtained an acknowledgement of the borders of the 1991 borders of Armenia. I could tell you more about this, but once again, allow me to express our full support to Armenia, and the fact that we're standing together with Germany and the President of the European Council is a key element. So this is what I meant to report to you. As you know, the next summit will take place in the United Kingdom, probably in the spring. We talked about it with Prime Minister Sunak, but he will be announcing the date. Once again, we will continue to work on that occasion of migration issues. Mr. President Aliyev agreed in the end to talk to the Armenian Prime Minister, but under a mediation, a European mediation that is clearly without France. Do you have an issue with President Aliyev? And do you think it is agreeable that negotiations could take place without you, even though you sat together at the same table in Chisinau a few months ago? So is France still a mediator country in this crisis? Second, is it true that you opposed President Erdogan attending these discussions today? And this would have led to the absence of both President Erdogan and to President Aliyev. And lastly, and more broadly, what can the European Union offer to Armenia? And what security guarantees are you expecting from Baku? I'm sorry for asking so many questions. Well, first of all, let me tell you that it is President Erdogan and President Aliyev who decided not to attend this summit. I can only regret it. And like you said, on previous summits, we had discussions, France attending, as well as Germany in Chisinau, together with President Aliyev and Prime Minister So this is their decision, and as a matter of fact, the Europeans of France and Germany very much insisted for Azerbaijan to attend. We also wanted to discuss the matter with Turkey, and it is certainly not our practice to express a veto for a third country to attend. So I can only regret this decision that was strictly taken by the relevant stakeholders, and it is for them to explain their decision. Next, it is not the first time that meetings take place in Brussels without France, simply because we are very demanding. And from the very beginning, we very much wanted, first of all, the rights of the minorities in the Nagorno-Karabakh to be complied with. We also wanted the 1991 borders to be acknowledged. So maybe we're not perceived as a very easy partners, but I believe we're fair. So we shall continue, of course, to be a mediator every time we can do so, and I hope that will be the case on the next summit of the EPC. We will also always be on the side of compliance with international law, and today the Armenian party. Because we've seen what is happening at the border, and this was witnessed by the mission sent by the European Union. There are some 150 kilometers of Armenian territory occupied at the moment by Azerbaijan, and there can be no double standards. So the stance of France is clear, will not change, and is in good faith. And I also remember the last two meetings, both in Chisinau and in Prague. And at the time, President Aliyev promised never to use force in Nagorno-Karabakh. So it's not France having an issue with Azerbaijan. It's the other way around. And there's an issue of respecting their own word and complying with international law. Next, the European Union, of course, stands with Armenia for the respect of international law. So we will assess the situation, but there's a strong unity with both Chancellor Scholz as well as President Michel. And I think this is the reason for the position taken, the decision taken by President Aliyev, like you said. Good afternoon. I'd like to know whether you perceive within your European partners, and more specifically the EU, whether you can perceive any growing concern regarding the American position and the risk of a weakening support to Ukraine. And I'd like to know as well whether you feel any fatigue on behalf of your European partners regarding Ukraine. Well, we did not have a chance to meet at 27 yet, but of course all of us are carefully monitoring the situation. And I also noticed the very clear words of both President Biden and Secretary of State Blinken reaffirming their support to Ukraine. So I believe that the commitments made both before and after the limits set by the American Congress, well, I think that there were some reassurances, as President Zelensky said himself. That being said, we're being vigilant, and it means also that Europe should continue to be strongly supportive of Ukraine, because we're within NATO and we have a very committed American partner. Nonetheless, we too shall be extremely committed because it is a European country sitting at our table. So the American support is a wonderful complement, but certainly cannot replace the European mobilization. And in this respect, I would say that my feeling that the European partners are very much in favor of continuing to support Ukraine. Of course, we'll see the decision that will be taken by Poland after the elections. I can only regret what was said during this campaign in Poland. It's not what the Polish authorities used to say a few months ago. But we in Europe very much want to support peace on our continent in the long run, so we cannot allow to be tired. Sir, you talked about what you called a third pillar, migration, which apparently was important in your decisions today. So first, regarding the European aspect of it, there's some European good news with the pact, asylum and immigration. Still, we see that Poland used a veto. So how do you combine and how can you move forward with different positions like this? Next, the press today has been describing what happened to a number of migrants arriving through the Alps and ending for some of them in Paris, some new migration routes where there is more pressure today. What do you think of that? First of all, I can only rejoice that an agreement was made at the European level. That's the fruit of the discussions we had with the Chancellor over the weekend and some discussions in Malta a week ago. So this is some sort of a first internal step. How do the Europeans organize themselves to better register and to better protect our borders and better register people arriving in France? So this is very much the outcome of what we've been working on. Now it's been approved by our ministers, and hopefully that will be the case as well in Parliament. So I very much would like to thank all of those who agreed to make concessions. And now the second element of your question. Now we're concentrating our effort in order to prevent these migration flows, because when men and women arrive in Europe, it is already too late. Of course, it is about sharing the burden, and Poland shall be part of it. But what we should be doing is be more efficient when people arrive in Europe, and that is the purpose of the agreement found by our ministers, and that was a proposal made in early 2022 by France. And second, we also need to better work at preventing these migration flows, and that's the purpose of the work with countries of origin and countries of transit. And this is at the heart of what we've been doing with President von der Leyen, Prime Minister Meloni, and what we want to continue to be doing with our European partners. Next, sadly, about these routes through the Alps and the south of France, we're familiar with them. We've seen how much pressure there was as well in Italy a few weeks ago, and now it is more in France. So first of all, we're working at dismantling these smuggling, these networks, because they are very much exploiting these people who are in dire situations. And second, as quickly as possible, we'd like to implement the agreement, the ministerial agreement, because if we are more efficient when it comes to registering people, we can tackle more easily the smugglers and send back to their country of origin these people. And we'll cooperate further with Italy, and I'd like to thank the Italian services for cooperating on tackling smuggling. We're well aware that men and women, these people are taking the ultimate risk. Some of them very much meet the criteria for asylum seeking, whereas others should be, as soon as possible, returned to their country of origin. One last question because I have to run.
Monsieur Jean-Louis.
Jean-Louis Bourlange, the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee at the French Assembly Parliament, said, enough about indifference, enough about being cowards. We have to stand by Armenia. And Prime Minister Born responded to him, but do you think we need to do more to support Armenia? Well, first of all, I believe that France is at the forefront of the support we can provide. Sometimes we condemned what was happening, sometimes even more than what the Armenian authorities were able to say in public. And I want to make sure that Europe continues to make sure that President Aliyev comes to the table of negotiations. And I will be calling him again because we need to talk. What is the most pressing is the humanitarian situation and the border. So we will continue to support Armenia. We want to make sure there is no destabilization, in particular coming from Russia. So it is not time for sanctions. That would be counterproductive and that would not enable us to better protect the Armenian territory and their people. It is about demanding, about being clear, including when it comes to our military support, but it is not time for sanctions because we need to continue to talk to Azerbaijan.
With Ms. Meloni, with von der Leyen, with Rutte, and with the Albanian Prime Minister and Rishi Sunak. What did you discuss, and particularly why are you interested in a partnership with Britain on migration, and why, or what does Albania bring to the party? It's quite a different country to the other four that were in the room.
I'm particularly kind because first I take an additional question, and second I will repeat what I said before you joined the meeting, which is not usual, because I developed precisely this issue in my introduction and in my speech. I do believe that the work we have to do together, and we will issue common lines of communication, is first to create synergies to prevent organization of smugglers and all these trafficking activities. This is exactly what we did with Albania, because you raised a question 5 years ago. This is what Prime Minister Sunak is trying to do with Albania now, with quite good results. And our conviction is that EPC is the right format, because if the EU, the UK, Western Balkans work together, we can prevent a lot of illegal migration coming from Western Balkans in our different countries. Second, we have to face, all of us, migration coming from the Eastern Road, Central Road, and Western Road coming to our countries, coming to EU and UK. And this is exactly the methodology, by the way, we propose to the British authorities now 1.5 years ago with this Calais format, when we propose to enlarge and not just to have a bilateral approach, UK and France, but to say we have to work with Belgium, Netherlands and some others precisely to be more efficient vis-à-vis the smugglers. We will enlarge this format and this approach to the ECP because it makes much more sense. So we will have common actions based on the coalition of the willings, meaning members of the EU, EU Commission, plus Albania, UK, plus all the others who will be ready to join the initiative, in order not just to prevent the traffics between our countries, but to work together vis-à-vis transit countries and origin countries in order to fight against migration, i.e. working with southern coasts of Mediterranean Sea in order to prevent these movements. So this is what we are working on. So we elaborate points in, 5 points document. So now our teams will work together. We will make an outreach, i.e. we will propose all the other members to join if they want. And the idea is to finalize something more constraining, I would say, in the margin or during the EPC summit organized by the UK. Non, là, cette fois-ci, je ne pourrai plus. Merci beaucoup.
Sorry, I have to run.